Okay, when you name a triangle, you're going to either name it by the lengths of its sides or by their angles. When you're naming them by the lengths of their sides and all three sides are of equal length, we call it an equilateral. When two of your sides are equal length, I think of the fact that you have two eyes, we call it an isosceles triangle. When none of the sides are of equal length, we call it scalene. When you have an equilateral triangle, you will always have three acute angles. An equilateral, again, will always be an acute triangle. When naming them by their angles, all triangles have two acute angles. It's the third angle that names it. For this one, we have a 90-degree angle, so we call it a right triangle. For this one, we have three angles that are acute, all three making it an acute triangle. When you have the third angle more than 90 degrees, we call it an obtuse angle. When you have a triangle, you need to make sure that you name it by its sides and by its angles. When naming your four-sided shapes, they are called quadrilaterals. We have learned two different types. A quadrilateral that has two pairs of parallel sides, parallel and parallel. Two pairs of parallel sides, we call it a parallelogram. If there is only one pair of parallel sides, we call it a trapezoid. We also learned that if there are no pairs of parallel sides, like this shape, we learned that it's called a trapezium. When you have a parallelogram, there are special types of parallelograms. If it is a parallelogram that has four right angles, so we have two pairs of parallel sides and four right angles, we call it a rectangle. When we have a parallelogram, two pairs of parallel sides, these two are parallel with these two, and all of your lengths are congruent or equal. Congruent means equal. We call it a rhombus. Notice that my angles in my shape are not 90-degree angles. We have two acute and two obtuse when we have a rhombus. Rectangles are parallelograms. Rhombuses are parallelograms. We have a special shape then called a square that has the four right angles like the rectangle, and it has the congruent sides like the rhombus, and we call it a square. A square is a special parallelogram. A square is a rectangle, a square is a rhombus, a square is a parallelogram, and a square is a quadrilateral. Now, a rectangle does not have to be a square, but it can be. A rhombus does not have to be a square, but it can be. On your hierarchy here, if you have a shape, anything that's below that shape, it could be. So your quadrilateral could be a parallelogram. Your quadrilateral could be a trapezoid, but it doesn't have to be. Same thing with your rectangle, your rhombus, and your square. Anything that's below the shape, it could be. Now, if you have a shape and anything above it, it will always be that shape. Meaning, if I have my rectangle, it could be the square, but it will always be a parallelogram and always be the quadrilateral. Same thing with my rhombus here. It could be that square, but it will always be the parallelogram and it will always be a quadrilateral. The only time that a rectangle is ever a rhombus is if it is a square. A rectangle and a rhombus will never be the same shape unless it is a square.